The paper was small, torn on one edge, and barely noticeable against the dark lining of her purse. I wouldn't have seen it if the strap hadn't slipped off the chair, tilting the bag just enough for the corner of the note to peek out like a mocking grin. I don't even know what made me look twice. Maybe the way she laughed across the yard, her head thrown back, the sound cutting through the warm summer air like it didn't have a single secret in it. I wasn't supposed to touch her things. I could practically hear her voice in my head, sweet but sharp. "Bernard, don't be paranoid. It's just a party." But that note, it felt like it was calling me, daring me to find out what I wasn't supposed to know. And I couldn't stop myself. My hands were shaking like a kid stealing candy as I slipped it out. The words inside were simple, just one line, but they hit me like a sledgehammer. "Does he suspect anything?" I felt my throat tighten. Who wrote this? Who was he? I looked up at Corinne across the patio. She was talking to that guy again, the tall one in the clean white polo who seemed to think he owned every conversation he walked into. They were close. Too close. He said something that made her smile in this way I hadn't seen in years. Not the polite smile she gives me, but the kind that makes her whole face light up. I crumpled the note in my fist and shoved it into my pocket before she could see me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought someone would notice. Everything around me, kids running with sparklers, neighbors chatting over plates of food, the faint music from the speakers, suddenly felt like static, meaningless noise. I kept replaying that one line in my head, over and over, like a cursed echo. When she walked back over, all warmth and casual smiles, I couldn't even meet her eyes. I just muttered something about needing another drink and walked off. I didn't know where to go, what to think, or what the hell I was supposed to do. All I knew was that something about my life, our life, wasn't what I thought it was an hour ago. I couldn't shake that note from my mind. The words, "Does he suspect anything?" burned in my pocket like they were alive, like they were whispering the truth I didn't want to hear. Every time I looked at Corinne, I found myself questioning everything I'd ever believed about her. She was leaning against the patio railing now, talking to two women from down the street, smiling and laughing as if nothing could possibly be wrong. It made me feel like the biggest fool standing there with my drink, pretending everything was fine. I kept thinking back to that guy, the one in the white polo. I didn't even know his name, which suddenly felt like a crime against myself. How could I be at a party with someone who could slip a note into my wife's purse without me even noticing? And why had she been so eager to talk to him earlier, leaning in, touching her hair, laughing like she hadn't laughed with me in years? My head started spinning with images I didn't want to imagine, all of them darker than the last. I decided to test her. I walked over, acting casual, and asked if she wanted to head home soon. She looked startled, almost like I'd caught her off guard, but then she quickly put on that perfect smile again. "Oh, we just got here," she said, giving my arm a gentle squeeze. "Go have fun, Bernard. Don't be such a grump." Her words were sweet, but there was a sharpness under them, like I was just an accessory to her perfect evening. As I walked away, I spotted something strange. That guy, the white polo guy, was standing near the grill, talking to the host, but his eyes kept darting toward Corinne. And when he noticed me watching him, he quickly looked away. It was such a small thing, but my stomach twisted. Something was going on. I just knew it. I found myself standing near her purse again, hands sweaty, heart pounding. I kept thinking about checking the note again, maybe finding something else, but I couldn't risk it with all these people around. So I just stood there like an idiot, staring at a bag like it was a bomb that might go off. Then it happened. As I turned away, I saw him, white polo, slip something else into his pocket. A small black keycard. I have no idea why it caught my attention, but the way he looked around first, like he was hiding something, sent chills through me. I didn't know if it was related to the note, but at that moment, every nerve in my body told me it was all connected. Corinne walked over, putting her hand on my back. "You look pale. Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but oddly distant, like she was performing concern. I mumbled something about the heat, but inside, I felt like the ground beneath me was cracking. I don't know why, but I kept picturing that note, those 4 haunting words, and the way she smiled so effortlessly. I had no proof of anything yet, but for the first time in years, I felt like I didn't even know who my wife really was. The party was alive with chatter, clinking glasses, and that faint hum of music that seemed to make everyone loosen up just enough to forget who they really were. Everyone but me. I couldn't relax. Not after that note. Not after watching her smile like that. I told myself I wasn't going to be that guy. The insecure husband lurking in corners. But that's exactly who I'd become. Every time Corinne drifted away into another conversation, I found myself watching her like a hawk, searching for cracks in the way she moved or the way her eyes lit up when she talked to someone. She was by the drinks table again, her hand brushing her hair out of her face as she leaned toward white polo guy. I caught a snippet of her laugh, light and effortless, the kind I hadn't heard in months, and it made something inside me twist. He leaned closer, saying something I couldn't catch, and she didn't move away. My throat went dry. It wasn't just my imagination. Something was wrong. I pretended to head for the restroom, but really, I was circling the yard, keeping my eyes on them. My heart was hammering like I'd just run a mile. I felt ridiculous, like a character in some bad soap opera, but I couldn't help it. Every time she smiled at him, I saw pieces of my life falling apart in real time. Then I caught something, barely a whisper, when I got close enough to the drinks table. His voice, low but clear. "You didn't tell him yet?" My entire body froze. Corinne's expression changed for just a second, like her face flickered between two masks, one for me and one for everyone else. She gave this tiny shake of her head and muttered something I couldn't hear, but it was enough to make my stomach churn. I ducked away before they could notice me, hiding like some coward behind the grill where the smoke gave me cover. My mind was racing. Didn't tell me what? I wanted to confront them both, to demand answers, but all I could do was clutch my drink like a lifeline and wait for my pulse to slow down. When I finally got a hold of myself, I decided to test her again. I walked straight over and said, "Corinne, could you help me grab something from the car?" It wasn't a question, it was a lifeline. I needed a moment alone with her. She blinked at me like I'd interrupted something important, then forced a smile and said, "Sure, 1 second." White polo guy smirked. Actually smirked, like he knew something I didn't. My fists tightened so hard I nearly cracked my beer can. On the way to the car, she was silent, fiddling with the strap of her purse. It was unlike her not to talk. Finally, I blurted, "Who was that guy?" She gave me a quick sideways glance, too quick, and said, "Just a neighbor." "Why?" Her voice was too casual, too smooth. I wanted to ask about the note right then and there, but I couldn't. Not yet. Something told me I needed to see how far this would go before I showed my hand. When we got to the car, I pretended to check for my phone while watching her reflection in the window. She looked nervous. That's when I decided I wasn't going to confront her at the party. No, I was going to watch, and I was going to catch her if she slipped. I told her I was going to hang back with the guys for a bit and encouraged her to go enjoy herself. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and walked back to the crowd. And just like that, my plan was set. For the next hour, I'd become a shadow, quietly watching her every move. I told myself I was just going to blend in, to watch without being noticed, but I must have looked like a man unraveling. Every second I wasn't near Corinne, I was scanning the party for her. I stood with a group of guys near the grill, nodding and pretending to listen to some story about someone's new deck installation, but my eyes never left her. She was moving through the crowd like she was part of some secret performance, smiling, laughing, touching people on the arm when she spoke. But it was when she returned to the drinks table that I felt my stomach twist again. White polo guy was waiting there. He wasn't laughing or talking like everyone else. He was leaning against the counter with this infuriatingly confident grin, and she walked straight toward him. I watched their faces closely, trying to read every expression, every flicker of emotion. At one point, he said something that made her tilt her head and bite her lip in that way I used to love. Only this time, it didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. She leaned in, and I swear I saw her fingers brush his arm. It wasn't long or obvious, but it was enough. My blood ran hot, and I had to grip my beer can so tightly that it dented. Then something strange happened. They both turned slightly, not facing me, but enough that I could see him slip something out of his pocket. A phone? A note? I couldn't see, but the way Corinne looked at him, it wasn't confusion, it was familiarity. They shared this tiny, almost imperceptible nod, like they had an understanding I was never meant to be part of. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some harmless conversation. Something was going on between them. I had to move closer. My heart was pounding as I slowly drifted toward the drinks table, trying to act casual. I grabbed a plate of chips, pretending I was just hungry, but my eyes were on them the whole time. I managed to catch one line as I passed. White polo guy saying, "Later, when he's distracted." Corinne glanced toward me, and her smile faltered for half a second before she caught herself. I walked away, my mind screaming, my body on autopilot. Later, when he's distracted. What did that mean? Were they planning something right here, tonight? My head was spinning. I couldn't think straight. The music, the chatter, the smell of barbecue. It all felt wrong, like the world around me was tilting. I found myself pacing near the side gate of the yard, hidden just enough to see them without being obvious. Corinne had moved on to a group of women now, laughing again, but White Polo wasn't far. He kept glancing at her, this strange, knowing look on his face, and every time their eyes met, I felt like I was the punchline of a joke I didn't understand. That's when I noticed her purse again. It was still on the chair where I'd seen it earlier. My chest tightened. I couldn't leave that note in there. If she saw it, she'd know I'd read it. She'd know I was onto her. So, when the moment felt right, I went back, acting like I was checking my phone, and carefully slid the note from her purse into my pocket. My hand shook as I did it, but I told myself it was the smart move. As I walked away, though, I caught sight of something else, something that made my blood run cold. On the table beside her purse was another folded piece of paper, smaller, almost hidden under a napkin. I didn't open it then, not with everyone around, but I grabbed it anyway, stuffing it into my pocket like I was stealing a secret. What I didn't know was that this second note would change everything. I didn't even wait to be alone. The curiosity clawing at my chest was unbearable, so I slipped around the side of the house where it was darker and pulled out that second note. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow, as I unfolded the paper. The handwriting wasn't the same as the first note. It was sharper, messier, almost frantic, and the words inside made me feel like the ground beneath me had turned to ice. He's starting to notice. Keep him away from the garage. The garage? What garage? I racked my brain, trying to figure out what this could possibly mean. This wasn't just about her and White Polo guy anymore. This felt like something bigger, something I wasn't supposed to know. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stuffed the note back into my pocket, suddenly aware of how dark and quiet it was around the side of the house. The party sounds were distant, muffled, like I was standing outside reality for a moment. I went back around to the backyard, trying to look casual, but my mind was spinning. Why the garage? There was only one garage on this property, our host's detached garage, which was closed tight. I started watching, scanning the yard for anything out of place, and that's when I saw Corinne again. She was holding a glass of wine now, talking to one of the neighbors, but her eyes kept flicking toward the garage door like she was checking if anyone was watching. I felt my chest tighten. She looked too calm, too deliberate, like she was performing happiness while something much darker brewed beneath. And White Polo guy? He wasn't far from the garage either. He lingered near it, talking with the host's brother, but I caught him glancing toward Corinne more than once. They were communicating. I could feel it. Not with words, but with these looks and half-smiles that I'd never seen between them before. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the note in my pocket felt like proof. I had to know what was going on in that garage. I walked over to Corinne, forcing a smile, and said, "I'm going to check something by the car, be right back." She gave me this odd little nod, too quick, almost nervous, and that only confirmed what I already suspected. She knew something I didn't. I slipped away, circling the yard until I reached the side of the garage. It was darker there, quieter, with only the glow of the backyard lights spilling faintly over the fence. I pressed my ear against the garage door, half expecting to hear nothing, but instead, I caught a muffled sound, like something metallic scraping faintly, followed by a quick whisper that made my stomach drop. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the voice. White Polo guy. He was inside. My pulse shot through the roof. Why was he in there? And why didn't anyone else seem to notice or care? I backed away before anyone could spot me, my brain screaming with questions I couldn't answer. When I returned to the party, Corinne was scanning the crowd like she'd lost something. When she saw me, she smiled a little too quickly, and I swear her hand went to her purse like she was checking for something. That's when it hit me. She was looking for the notes. She knew. And if she realized I had them, I didn't know what would happen next. I needed to play it cool, but I'm not good at this. I'm the guy who wears his heart on his sleeve, who apologizes for things he didn't do just to avoid conflict. And now here I was, standing in the middle of a party, sweating like I'd run a marathon, trying not to look like I was unraveling while every fiber of my being screamed that my life was about to explode. But I couldn't just let it go. I had to know what was happening in that garage, even if it meant following Corinne when she thought I wasn't looking. I kept my distance from Corinne for the next 20 minutes, pretending to mingle while my mind was anything but social. I could barely remember the last time I'd spoken to anyone without second-guessing every word that came out of my mouth. She, on the other hand, looked completely at ease, laughing, sipping her wine, playing the part of the perfect wife like nothing was wrong. But every so often, her eyes would flick toward the side yard where the garage sat, as if she was waiting for a signal. It was subtle, but I noticed. I noticed because I couldn't stop watching her. When the crowd grew louder, someone turned up the music and a group started singing along to some old summer anthem. Corinne quietly slipped away. She didn't tell anyone, didn't look back, just placed her empty glass on a table and walked toward the side of the house. I froze, unsure of whether to follow her immediately or wait. My gut told me to move, and I obeyed. I stayed back far enough that she wouldn't see me, ducking behind the tall hedge that framed the walkway. My heart hammered in my chest, not just from fear of being caught, but because deep down I knew this wasn't going to end with something innocent. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed I was wrong. But as I crept closer, I heard it. The faint creak of the garage door opening, followed by hushed voices. Corinne's voice, and his. I crouched near the side of the structure, close enough to hear snippets of their conversation. "We don't have long," she whispered. Her tone was tight, urgent, so unlike the warm laughter she'd given me earlier. Then his voice followed, low and almost mocking. "He's clueless. He won't find out if you keep it together." My skin crawled. My wife, the woman I've trusted with my entire life, talking to some stranger like they shared a secret world I wasn't part of. I felt my knees go weak. My first instinct was to barge in and demand answers, but I stopped myself. What if I was overreacting? What if it was something else, something innocent that just sounded bad out of context? But then I heard it. I heard him say, "It's all here. Everything we need. Let's move it before he gets suspicious." That broke me. I pressed my ear against the thin side panel of the garage, my breath shaking. There was the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. A box? A bag? I couldn't tell, but the sound of scraping and shifting made my mind spiral with possibilities. Drugs? Something illegal? Or worse, what if this was something personal, something about me? I backed away before I did something I couldn't take back. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely keep them at my sides. I returned to the party, trying to act normal, but I knew I wasn't fooling anyone. A neighbor asked if I was okay, and I just laughed awkwardly, muttering something about the heat. Meanwhile, my eyes stayed locked on that side gate, waiting for her to come back. And she did. Corinne returned like nothing had happened, her face glowing, her smile flawless. She walked up to me, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "You look tense. Relax, Bernie. It's just a party." That voice, sweet, melodic, felt like poison now. I stared at her, wanting to scream, but all I could do was nod like some pathetic fool. But here's the part that really got me. As she turned to grab another drink, I saw something sticking out of her purse, something I hadn't seen before. A keycard, black, with no markings. The same one I'd seen white polo guy holding earlier. My chest tightened like a vice. What was she hiding from me? I slipped away again, unable to stay in that crowd of smiling liars. I needed a plan. Something was happening tonight, and if I didn't figure it out, I knew I'd regret it for the rest of my life. I just didn't know yet that what I was about to find would be so much worse than I could have imagined. By the time Corinne disappeared into another conversation, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't keep pacing around the yard like a paranoid idiot while something was clearly happening just a few steps away from me. I had to know what was inside that garage. I waited until I was sure her eyes weren't on me, then slipped around the side of the house. My chest was tight, my breathing shallow, but there was a cold determination in me I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just curious anymore. I felt like my entire marriage, my entire life, depended on what I was about to find. The garage door was closed again, but the faintest strip of light glowed underneath. I pressed my ear to the metal, but all I could hear was the muffled hum of the party behind me and the faint thud of my own heartbeat. I tried the handle. Locked. I should have walked away, but something about that black keycard burned in my mind. I didn't have it, But I did have something else, a pocket knife on my keyring, the kind I used to open packages. I jammed it into the side latch, wiggled and twisted, praying no one would see me crouched like a criminal. After a minute that felt like an hour, the lock gave a faint click. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The air was cooler, musty, with the smell of oil and something metallic that made my stomach churn. The only light came from a single bulb overhead, flickering just enough to cast long, thin shadows across the floor. And right in the center of the garage was a stack of boxes, large, unmarked, sealed tight with black tape. There was something about them, something almost deliberate in how they were arranged, like someone wanted them hidden yet ready to move at a moment's notice. I moved closer, every step feeling heavier than the last. My hands were clammy as I reached out and pulled at the tape of the first box. Inside, I expected tools or party supplies or something boring enough to make me feel stupid for even coming here. But no. Inside the box were envelopes, dozens of them. Thick, stuffed envelopes. My hands trembled as I pulled one out and opened it. What I saw made my mouth go dry. Stacks of cash, crisp bills, bundled together, more money than I'd ever seen in my life outside of a bank. My brain couldn't process it at first. What the hell was this? Who kept something like this in a garage? I dug deeper, pulling out another envelope, then another. More cash. Then, tucked between the bundles, I found something worse, a photograph. It was Corinne. Not from tonight, but recently. She was with white polo guy, leaning against a car, smiling in a way I hadn't seen her smile at me in years. He had his arm around her waist, casual and familiar, like this was a normal thing. The photo wasn't just a snapshot, it was proof. My knees felt weak. I dropped the envelope, my breath ragged, a sound like static filling my ears. I was so focused on the photo that I didn't notice the footsteps outside until it was too late. The door creaked. Someone was coming in. I scrambled, shoving the envelopes back into the box and pushing it closed just as the door opened a few inches. I dove behind the shelves stacked with paint cans, crouching low, heart hammering. Everything's still here. I heard a voice mutter, his voice. White polo guy. He stepped inside, his shoes scraping the concrete floor. She's keeping him busy, he added, almost to himself, before moving toward the boxes. I held my breath so hard my lungs ached. One wrong move, one sound, and I'd be caught. I watched through the gap between the shelves as he checked the boxes, his back turned to me. My mind was racing with questions. What was he planning with my wife? Why was she in on this? And how much of my life had been a lie? When he turned his back again, I made a choice I didn't think I'd have the guts to make. I bolted. I slipped out of the garage as quietly as I could, running around the far side of the house before he even realized someone had been in there. My pulse was a roar in my ears. When I finally stopped, leaning against a tree at the edge of the yard, I thought I might be sick. Corinne was still there, still laughing, still acting like nothing had happened. I stared at her from across the lawn, holding onto the photo I'd stolen from the envelope. My wife, smiling with a man who had just checked on boxes full of cash. Something was happening tonight, something dangerous, and I wasn't sure I even wanted to know the full truth anymore. But I also knew one thing for certain. I wasn't leaving this party without answers. I stood there, frozen, with that photograph burning a hole in my hand. I wanted to storm over to Corinne, demand the truth, and tear down whatever facade she had been building. But something inside me told me to wait, to breathe, to not let my panic drown me. I watched her move gracefully through the party, chatting with people, her laugh carrying easily above the noise. And then, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Every time she looked around the yard, her eyes weren't scanning for white polo guy, they were searching for me. When our eyes finally met, something softened in her face. She excused herself and walked straight over. "Bernie, can we go talk? Just us?" Her voice wasn't sharp or distant anymore. It was gentle, almost nervous. I didn't know if I was ready, but I followed her to the side of the house, my heart still pounding. She took a deep breath, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I know something's been bothering you tonight. You've been on edge. What's wrong?" Her eyes, wide and honest, locked onto mine. I couldn't hold it back anymore. I showed her the photo I'd found, my hand trembling. "What is this, Corinne? What's going on with you and that guy? And what's in the garage? Don't lie to me." For a moment, her face was blank, and I braced myself for the worst. Then, to my shock, she laughed, Not the fake laugh I'd imagined all night, but a real, heartfelt laugh that made me feel like an idiot. Bernie, oh my God, that photo? That's from last week. We've been planning something for you. What? I blinked, my mind refusing to believe it. She stepped closer, placing her hand on mine. I've been working with Mark. Yeah, that's White Polo Guy, to plan your surprise birthday party. The garage? It's full of decorations, rented equipment, even the money we pooled together for the caterer. We wanted to throw you the kind of party you never had. And the notes? She smiled sheepishly. Those were from Mark's sister. She's been helping me plan. We were worried you'd notice something, and, well, I guess you did. I felt like the air had been punched out of me. All that paranoia, the creeping dread, the ugly thoughts. I'd been wrong. Completely wrong. Corinne reached into her purse, pulled out the black keycard, and handed it to me. It's the rental lock for the setup in the garage. Do you really think I'd do something to hurt you? I've been doing all of this for you, Bernie. I stared at her, the weight of my own insecurities sinking in. My chest loosened, and I let out a laugh that was half relief, half embarrassment. I'm such an idiot. She smiled softly and pulled me into a hug. You're not an idiot. You just love me too much. But Bernie, you have to trust me. We're a team, remember? As we walked back into the party, her hand in mine, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in months. Maybe this night wasn't about suspicion or secrets. Maybe it was about realizing how much I needed to trust her, and how much she truly cared. And for the first time that evening, I let myself smile, genuinely smile, knowing that despite all my doubts, we were still us.